the talk. I'm happy to begin. So if I can have your attention. So it's a wonderful thing for me to be here tonight. I should introduce myself. First of all, my name is Jeffrey Tucker, and I'm the editor of the Chant Cafe and the new Liturgical Movement blog. What else? I guess I'm director of publications for the Church Music Association of America, and also, so I wrote a book, Sing Like a Catholic, and that's good. That's a good thing. And then, I also wrote the introduction to the new edition of Why Catholics Can't Sing. Do you know this book? Yes. Yeah. So it's a great book, isn't it? Right. I mean, it's a kind of a wonderful book. And the new edition has my introduction to it, so I'm very thrilled. It's funny for me because when that book first came out, well, Kathy, do you remember, I think I was living in DC at the time, right? And when that book came out. And I didn't know anything about Catholic music, so it was a striking thing to pick up that book, Why Catholics Can't Sing, because I vaguely got interested in the topic of Catholic music. Just a quick biography on my part, which I recounted only the other day because I was just interviewed by a newspaper at Notre Dame University about this whole subject of Catholic music. And they wanted to know how I got into it. So for me, it was a little bit strange. I was raised in Southern Baptist faith, and then vaguely sort of lost interest in it, and thought that it might be a good thing to do something just completely outlandish, like go to the Catholic Church. So I stumbled into the 1 p.m. of all things, right? Who could imagine this could happen? At the National Shrine of Immaculate Conception, there used to be a Latin Mass at 1 in the afternoon, which is an ordinary form Latin chanted Mass. And I wanted to get as far away from the Baptist church as I possibly could. So it seemed like, delightfully pagan. I thought, well, surely this is far away as you could possibly get. So listen, that whole experience just intrigued me to such an extent to hear this very elderly priest, chanting very simple notes from the altar. The style of the music was so pure, and yet suggested a sort of level of complexity that I'd never even encountered in the symphonic repertoire and the jazz I'd been playing for many years, and I'd been a lifetime musician, but there was some truth that was emerging from these simple notes from the altar that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I couldn't quite make sense of it, but it was the invitation for me personally into this whole world of this faith that I could only then just imagine. So that was before the ages of MP3s, and we only had things like tape recorders and stuff. So I went and recorded it. I sat on the front row and recorded it every week and took it back to my apartment and listened to this chanted Mass all throughout the week. And I'd go back and listen and record it again. I didn't believe a word of it. I didn't understand a word of it, right? But I didn't know I was converting either. Sneaky way. So the church aesthetics trick us. So gradually, 3 years later, I became a Catholic. And then, to my shock, I actually went to a regular parish and discovered the whole world. What's wrong with you guys? Where's the Latin chant? Like every other Catholic parish I've been to has. So for me, it's been a long struggle of trying to do what I can in my own life to try to universalize that beautiful truth, which isn't a complicated truth, it's just a few notes, it's just the Word of God put to music from the altar. The time touches eternity. We bring together all the greatest things in life, art, faith, and salvation, all wrapped up in one's package. This is incredible. I mean, this is an amazing thing. It's implausibly beautiful. I just wanted to hear it, that's all. So about 12 years ago or so, I began to really dedicate myself to this task. And I would walk around and like every young Catholic jerk does, and demand that priests, bring Gregorian chant. You give me some Gregorian chant in this place, I can't stand this anymore. But the thing that everybody would say, this is back in the day, they would say, oh, you mean sort of like St. Agnes, Monsignor Schuler's parish. This is always the model. This is what everybody would toss around. Everywhere you would go, anywhere in the country, people would just say this. Oh, you mean, the ordinary form with Latin chant and polyphonic music and that sort of thing? Oh, you mean like Monsignor Schuler. And I didn't know who this was, or what this was, or why it even mattered. But it's always been the model. I mean, this environment, this parish, this glorious thing that Monsignor Schuler created has served as a kind of beacon. Now, there was a time when everybody thought it was the last of the great. It was the last holdout. It was the history. It was an antique. It was something that we could go to visit to see maybe what it was once like, but it said nothing for the future. And now here we stand, 2013. Everything's changed, hasn't it? Everything's different. Nobody would have imagined 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we'd be where we are today. A completely different world, where young ministers of music, young music professionals get into the Catholic Church, they encounter a catastrophic situation. And they want to know what's the right way to reform. Where am I going from here? And you know where they're looking, right? They're looking to St. Paul, Minnesota, at St. Agnes, Monsignor Schuler's legacy. This is what they turn to. They want to know, how can we get from here to there? This is the model and the ideal. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, it took remarkable vision for somebody like Monsignor Schuler to have stood so much against the tide, to have had that prophetic vision to see what could be, but wasn't at the time, to have such clarity about the errors of his time, and to know with such certainty about what the future would entail. And he knew it, and he saw it. And I'm not entirely sure he lived long enough to see it flourish as it is now. But his vision is being realized every day. A mistake I make is I have a published phone number, right? So people call me all the time. And and I get lots of calls, every few days. I work in the field of economics normally, so my office is, I work in an office with people who are thinking only about finance and economics and that sort of thing, because I'm not a full-time professional musician. So I get these calls, and everybody can hear me talking loudly on the phone with church musicians. Detailed discussions, and people around me are confused by this. But and it's always the same question, how can I get from here to there? And it's always a delight to me, because, as I said, it's no longer the case that people are aspiring to the errors of the past. They're aspiring to a vision of a liturgical world that Monsignor Schuler imagined could actually happen, and worked in his own life and his own parish, and throughout his entire ministry to see achieved. And by the way, he did this facing tremendous derision, actually. I don't know if you're aware of this, but he was very much put down in his time. I mean, people would sort of make fun of him, like he's some sort of dinosaur, which is absurd, actually. He saw a future that other people were not willing or able to see. So I thought a nice thing for me to do tonight, in tribute to his memory, and in tribute to his triumph, actually, to examine an article he wrote in 1976, which I recently had the pleasure of reading. I don't know how many of you have actually sat down and read his work. There's a very interesting aspect to his work, because given the times in which he was writing, like 1976, imagine how terrible he was in 1976. I can't even conceive of it. You know, I think I would have just been despairing, just every single day. Like there's absolutely no hope for the future whatsoever. But he tended to write with a sort of confidence, like he knew that we were going to get through this. He had this sort of broad range, you know. Whatever was going on at the moment, he figured it was, you know, basically irrelevant. You know, that give it enough time, and things will come around. And so he wrote this beautiful article, in 1976, called "Church Music After Vatican II." 76. Now, this would have been about 10 years after it became really obvious that a gigantic calamity had happened. So it's only 10 years later, and it's right in the thick of it. If you think about it too, I mean, the gradual that it pertained to the ordinary form. Well, first of all, what was called the Msgr had only come about in 1969 and 1970, so you know that's only 6 years old. The gradual that pertained to the Mass, meaning the music that actually was applicable to the ordinary form of the Mass at the time, had only been out 2 years. I mean, it wasn't released until 1974. You know, so this is a period of tremendous confusion and disorientation all around. So he writes this article in 76. And he begins by describing the atmosphere in 1963, which is hard for many people to imagine. But at the time, church musicians were wildly optimistic about what was coming. Incredible, isn't it? 1963. But they're looking at a church council. If you look at the actual details of what the Second Vatican Council called for. I mean, this is the most pro-Gregorian chant council in the history of the church, right? I mean, so we get an open statement. Mass should be a sung Mass, and the song should be a Gregorian chant. This should always have first place at the Mass, and all of the parts that belong to the people should be sung by the people, and the priest should sing the Mass. And we should avail ourselves of the remarkable treasury of sacred music, which is of inestimable value, even higher than all the other arts, and so on and so on. This is the church council. So of course, Msgr Schuler and his generation were so thrilled. I mean, everything had happened just right. This had been the culmination of a century of work. That had begun really in the late 19th century with the liturgical movement. Part of that was the reconstruction of the Gregorian chant. So we saw in the Second Vatican Council a beautiful culmination of everything we've been working for 100 years. And Msgr Schuler actually went even further. He said that the Second Vatican Council actually improved church music over the way it had been typically practiced. And I was really intrigued by this because he described the Council's reforms as a liberation and a purification of music in the service of the church. There's the culmination of a century of work to restore the Gregorian chant and an expansion of the musical possibilities. And one thing that really annoyed him was that in the pre-conciliar times there was a kind of a puritanical and mistaken view of sacred music that had, for example, ruled out things like Viennese orchestral masses, or that had unnecessarily truncated the repertoire. And he saw, and also, of course, the prevailing practice before the Second Vatican Council, people don't understand this, was not the sung Mass, it was the low Mass with hymns, you know. We wonder where the hymns came from. We have four hymn sandwich, usually every parish now. I mean, you could trace that to the low Mass culture before the Second Vatican Council. So he saw the Council as sort of, it's an intriguing thing, that whole generation, that they actually believe that we're going to finally do something about the problem of the persistence of vernacular hymnody in the Mass, and we're going to replace it with beautiful Gregorian chants with Latin. Imagine that, right? Extraordinary, right? Didn't quite work out that way. So this article, written 10 years after, or I guess 12 years after the close of the council, 13 years, he said that it had become clear by by 1973, that the whole dream had been shattered entirely, that none of it had been realized, that their wild enthusiasm and excitement that had greeted Sacrosanctum Concilium everything had turned to dust, everything had been shattered, every dream had been betrayed, everything had fallen apart completely. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for that generation to have achieved, in a sense, as far as they're concerned, the height of their careers, the height of everything they ever dreamed about doing, only to have it completely shattered and fallen apart. So the purpose of this article was to investigate what he considered the 5 major reasons. And I would like to kind of recount what those 5 major reasons are for why the dream came crashing down. It's not the totality of everything, but it's what he considers to be the main ones. So in the first place, he said that after the council there was a great forgetting of the distinction between sacred and secular music. That these are really different things. That there's some kinds of music that belongs in church, and some kinds of music that does not belong in church. And it's, he wasn't of the view that you could somehow draw up a white list and a black list. He wasn't of this generation. He didn't think this. It's a little more complex than that. But he believed there was such a thing as sacred music. It wasn't somehow embedded in an objective quality of the notes. It wasn't even necessarily part of the rhythmic apparatus of music. Certainly, sacred music is distinguished by its text. It should be a holy text. But beyond that, what is sacred and what is secular is mostly determined, according to Msgr Schuler, by the cultural messages that you receive from the music. So you can hear today, even now, I play this trick on my friends all the time. I say, what do you think about this music? And I'll put on a piece of Latin polyphony. And they go, well, it sounds like church, right? Do you do this? Right? I like to do this to my friends. What do you think of this? Oh, it sounds like church. Oh, okay. Yeah. Just checking. Everybody knows what church music sounds like. Right? So, and if you try to play that music at a party, as I often do, it doesn't work. You're not really into it. Like, can we do something about this problematic music? A little Justin Bieber might improve it. So it was completely forgotten that there's a sacred and secular distinction. And actually, it's an amazing thing when you look back at the kind of documents that the bishops' conferences produced in this period. It's just downright embarrassing. They've deleted them from the website. It's a good thing too. But there was a document called Music and Catholic Worship. Right? Music and Catholic Worship is just. I think you can only find it like, I don't know. You have to sort of look in the deep archives or something to get a copy of this nowadays. But because it's since been replaced. But at one point. It actually says that there's no distinction between secular music. That the models of the past really don't pertain to the future at all. This is the U.S. bishops. It's not something the bishops wrote, but it was a small committee, and you know how this works, right? It gets signed off, and people are busy, and whatever. Somehow, and that was the prevailing document for a very long time. So yeah, this whole distinction was completely forgotten. There's a wonderful history of the folk mass that came out a couple of years ago that describes, just the astonishing efforts that, in the late 1960s, it was nothing to hear, Bob Dylan, in mass. Whatever you heard on the radio, you would frequently hear it in the liturgy, and this is what people aspired to do. And it was to such an extent that by the time the St. Louis Jesuits came along, with their now famous repertoire, which we all, which I have made fun of for years, in a very cruel way, it was actually a conservatizing device, by the time the St. Louis Jesuits came along, because this is music actually from Scripture. And at least it wasn't just, taken straight off the pop charts, so this is... now, Monsignor Schuler he has some very interesting observations about this whole topic, about the distinction between secular and secular music. So here's one that I found very interesting. I've been thinking about it ever since I read it. He says, of course, there's music that's admissible to church, that is drawn from the secular culture. And he says, in times when the faith is really robust in society and unquestioned and pervasive and widely accepted, then the church can be a little more liberally minded about admitting this music into the life of her liturgy. But then in times when there's a lack of faith, to the point that secular music just is deeply entrenched into a kind of an aggressive world of godlessness, then the church becomes more conservative and should keep this music ever more at bay. So this is Msgr's, and he kind of reconstructs the history in light of this observation. It's very, very interesting. Well, what was going on in the 60s, right? This is not the time. This is not the age of faith, probably. It's not the first thing we would describe it as. This is not a time where the Catholic Church is like flourishing as never before in human history, right? And this is at that very time when the secular styles were admitted to liturgy, causing massive confusion. So that was the one error. And of course the fix there is to recall the second secular distinction, which I think we're increasingly doing. The second one is the role of the vernacular. Now this is a very interesting problem that the Sacrosanctum Concilium raises. The role of vernacular, because on one hand you have this announcement that the Gregorian chant gets first place in liturgy. On the other hand, we now have for the very first time permission given for English or for the vernacular to be admitted to Mass, without a clear, sort of boundaries or designations on exactly how that would play itself out, and a great deal of authority to govern how this would work itself out was given to the national conferences. And so then, of course, after the Sacrosanctum Concilium was passed, it was about a minute and a half later, the entire Mass was in English, and that's not entirely true. But by 1965, we got our first missal in the United States, and there was a tremendous confusion. It was just, I don't know, have you looked at the 1965 missal? It's a very strange thing, I have one at home. So now everybody at Mass knows Gloria in Excelsis Deo et Aeternum Pax Dominibus, right? But no, they couldn't keep that in Latin. That's changed to English suddenly. So we get the whole ordinary of the Mass in English in the 1965 missal. Kyrie eleison, no, that's got to be in English. Nobody understands Kyrie eleison. We have to have that in English. So, but then the Mass papers themselves are all entirely in Latin, and the readings, I believe, are preserved in Latin, 1965 missals. Anybody remember? Yes. Preserved in Latin, right? So very, very interesting. It was like all the stuff that people knew in Latin, that was gone. The stuff they didn't know, that was really, it made no sense. It just didn't make it. There was a great confusion about what should and shouldn't be in the vernacular. Now, there's a lot of evidence if you look at what was behind the embrace of the vernacular, that really the concern mostly pertained to the readings. That would have been the place to begin. Vernacularization, the lections of the Mass. But everything kind of, went out of control. Now, as far as Monsignor Schuler is concerned, the problem is that Gregorian chant is basically music that's textually driven. The music flows out of the word, and the word is in Latin. So, on one hand, you have this document saying Gregorian chant is first place, on the other hand, you have this permission for the vernacular. It was impossible to reconcile those two things. The widespread impression was that anything that was in Latin is just of the past. It's not part of the great new Pentecost, and it had to go. So Gregorian chant got thrown out for that reason. The third issue that he said was a great source of confusion was the role of participation. The role of the people's participation in Mass. Now, this is a very interesting issue for me because this has been the kind of song and dance for the mainstream music organizations in this country for decades and decades. They will tell you that the one and only principle that should pertain to music is participation. So there's nothing else, really. Whatever song I throw at you, if you're participating in it, then it's liturgical. If you're not participating in it, then it's just some horrible thing. So this puts the music director in the position of sort of being this cheerleader, this sort of coercive, sort of despot, up front, demanding that everybody ratify his judgment over repertoire by singing along with it. So you go to a Catholic church and you get this huge harangue, from the front, over a microphone. Now it's time to sing the great song, and don't you dare not sing it. And then you get these sort of Catholics, recalcitrant, and you're unable to hurt them, and unwilling, sort of rebels at their heart, and they're just sort of using their hymn book basically to hide in. This is Catholic parish life. It's been going on for decades. So this whole ridiculous emphasis on participation, as if it's the only thing that Catholic music should all be about. I mean, it's to the point of absurdity. I'm sure this is all coming to an end. I mean, it can't last. But if you go to many cathedral music programs now, I know they're doing their best, but there's such a kind of taboo against excluding the people's voices from things like the Gloria. That you go to a really elaborate cathedral program where they spend, lots of money on orchestras and you're dragging timpani up the stairs, to the choir loft, to perform some gigantic Beethoven thing, before Mass. And then by the time Mass actually comes, the music is sort of, not high. It's not sophisticated. It's actually quite simple and ridiculous. All for the purpose of allowing people to participate in it. As if the people are just idiots. And so you get these elite musicians, performing all the highbrow music from the balcony, and then the people given this insipid stuff. To sing for the rest of the Mass. And it really doesn't make any sense. And it's gone so far that most of the mainstream Glorias that are sung, that are presented today by publishers, are not even presented as a straight-through text. We've even sort of Bowdlerized the Gloria to make it, turn it into a sung response kind of antiphonal thing, just so that the people kind of something to sing, because we all know that Catholics can't sit for longer than like 20 seconds, singing something. This seems to be the prevailing view. So this role of participation, and Msgr Schuler was actually, in this article, very clear about what the Second Vatican Council was calling for when it asked for people's involvement. A lot of it has roots in a kind of a low Mass culture again, a history in which it was not impossible to show up at Mass and hear nothing until the Sanctus Pass, and then be reminded that it's time to go for communion, and then receive, and you go. Okay? This is a world we don't know anymore, but this is a world that was once known. And this is what the liturgical movement was seeking to end. The idea of participation in the liturgical movement's vision was that people would understand and be engaged with spiritually, mentally, intellectually, in every way, and all of the words of Holy Scripture that they would hear at Mass, and all the activities that were taking place in the Mass, had nothing to do with requiring the people all sing everything that was a sung part of the Mass. I mean, this is a crazy rendering of what is actually a very beautiful vision. I always wonder, when priests come to me and say, well, what about the people's participation? You just want to sort of say, well, Father, your homily goes on for 10 or 15 minutes. There's not a whole lot of people's participation in that. And the fourth point that Msgr Schuler emphasized is a very interesting one that I don't have a lot of familiarity with, and I think it's beginning to be rectified now. But he spoke about the problem, the Second Vatican Council spoke about the problem of training in music in the seminaries, which I gather has been lacking for some time. So he thought this was the great neglected thing, that if you're not training priests in seminary to chant the Mass and to train them something about the music of the Mass, that they will never really be in a position to lead in their parishes and guide the music program going forward. And, you know, I totally get this. I mean, you're all Catholics, you know the way the parishes work, right? So the priest is typically terrified of the music question. It's like, you know, if a parishioner comes up, Father, I want to talk to you about the music. I don't talk about that subject. That's just, I'm not going there, right? They're just terrified of it. If they can keep the peace between the praise group and the young adult Be Not Afraid group and the fledgling Scola, they're happy. That's as good as it gets. If they're not just killing each other, then that's good. I mean, the priests don't want to talk about this. Again, part of the problem is that most of them are not in a position to lead, and to provide that sort of guidance. Also, musicians are ridiculously cruel to priests and to the in general. For one thing, musicians are always aware. They're always aware that they're going to outlast the priest, no matter what, right? The pastor, okay, he's going to be here 5 or 6 years. I've been here 20. I don't know what this guy is talking about, right? So they always have the sense that, whatever the new guy is, talking about, he'll come and go. I mean, it reminds me of what it must be like to be a sort of career bureaucrat in the Department of Labor and the new political appointee comes in or something. It's like, he'll be gone in a few years. Don't worry. So no, we need to have our, and I must say, it's one of the wonderful things that the CMAA has done with our colloquium is we've invited priests in to come and be part of the rehearsals of musicians, so they can actually experience what it's like for musicians to have to learn this music. It's not easy, right? It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and why we're doing it, and just the sincerity with which we do it, and the resources that are available. I mean, pastors need to know about these things. Ideally, a pastor would arrive in a parish being more of an expert on Catholic music than the musicians that are embedded in the parish. And let me tell you, it wouldn't be that difficult. It wouldn't be so hard. So this is something I think is being addressed more and more. It's my sense. Is that your sense that we're starting to change in that sense? I mean, there are more and more seminaries that are starting to train in music. This is good. The final thing that Monsignor Schuler identified as the great error of the time was generally the theme that later came to be emphasized on the Benedict papacy, was the need for continuity. Continuity between old and new. There was a widespread perception after the council that everything old just had to go. We didn't know what the church was going to be in the future, but all we knew was that it wasn't going to be built what it was built up in the past. It was the great mystery. We're just going to leave it open and just experiment. But Monsignor Schuler, he said, every age must stand squarely on the shoulders of those who have gone before. Creation ex nihilo is a prerogative of God alone. Musical styles develop with their roots in the past, eliminate the past, and one eliminates the past, and one finds that the wellspring of musical inspiration and composition dry up too. So that was Monsignor Schuler's perspective. What he wanted was, he created a vision for universal access to a musical fundamentum that was prophetic and has been in many ways fulfilled in the years since his death. And let me say a few words, too, about one of the things that I found very important. I think that Monsignor Schuler was so brilliant in seeing so many things that were lost on an entire generation. One thing that I think he could have been even more, I don't know how to say it. He was very attached to Latin as the language that we're going to chant, and which I totally get. I mean, there's every reason to believe that this music should not be put into English, because it is a Latin, it does stem from the Latin text itself, and yet I'm thinking about parish realities today, and I talk to a lot of musicians. have viable means to get from here to there. Msgr Schuler was very much in a position of preserving something, but in so many parishes now, there is nothing at all. I mean, we are really starting from the beginning. I mean, even in my own parish, 10 years ago, I remember starting the recessional hymn, Salve Regina, and I thought everybody would just be thrilled, and there was silence, right? You know, and it's things like that that alarm me, right? You just realize everything's gone, and that is true in most places. So the question most parishes are dealing with, which St. Agnes never had to deal with, which is, how do you start getting going from absolutely nothing, where, you know, every Sunday, the entrance is that bird song, and every communion is "Don't be scared." You know, at some point, you've got to have a way to begin. And the way to begin, as Monsignor Schuler would say, as he would say, as Second Vatican Council says, we must begin with the liturgical text. So I would urge you to think about this. It's very easy for musicians to only think about music, right? You think about style. You know, I'm impossibly agitated when I hear a song I don't like at Mass. It's very easy to focus on the hymn wars, what hymn I prefer versus what you prefer. These are not very good grounds for building for the future. Where we really need to begin is on the liturgical text itself. In particular, we need to be thinking about the propers of the Mass, which are just the gravely neglected thing in our time. Preconciliar times, they weren't always sung along the Mass, but you know what? They're always said by the priest at least. Now, they're supposed to be sung by the Schola, and they're not sung by anybody at all. And so we're leaving out major parts of the Mass. And week after week after week, we are cheating the people of the liturgy when we do this. This is where we need to begin. We need to begin with the text. And if it means beginning with that text rendered in English, I think that's a very good starting point. Because at least it gets us, you know, saying and singing the Word of God as versus something else. And it helps us and trains us to aspire towards the idea, which is, of course, Latin chant. And I realized this some years ago when I was speaking in Atlanta, and I gave an impassioned, there were 200 musicians gathered there, an impassioned lecture about the importance of the Mass propers. And I was just utterly out of control that day. I mean, I just couldn't stop talking about the Mass propers. Like, I had the whole theory down, and it was like, you know, sweating and, you know, pacing and whipping up everybody into a frenzy, and it was just great. And I finished the lecture, and then at the end somebody raised their hand and said, well, listen, I'm totally persuaded by this whole Mass propers thing. It's completely new to me, but, you know, the Latin thing's a problem for me. I'm not sure I understand anything about Latin, and I certainly can't read it really. And even if I did, I'm pretty sure, based on experience, that if I introduce Latin chant like next week in the propers, as opposed to my processional hymn, that I would be fired instantly. So what do you think I should do about this? And I said, well, this is not a problem, just sing them in English. So then I took the next question, and the next question was, where am I going to get that book of Mass propers in English, actually? And that's where I was stumped. This is 2 or 3 years ago, and at that time I just had a series of links. Okay, so if you want to discredit yourself in front of a bunch of Catholic musicians, say, oh, it's not a problem. Go to http, no, this doesn't work. You've got to have a book, a name of a book. So I stood there, and suddenly it was like my mouth fell open, and I just kind of turned white. And after what seemed like, you know, a 10-minute pause, it was probably like 10 seconds, I just said, you know, that book doesn't yet exist. I'm so sorry. And you could just see every face in the room just fell, you know, like, oh, I enjoyed this guy's lecture, but it has no relevance for me whatsoever. And it was I left that event, and I called my friend Adam Bartlett. Actually, he wasn't a friend. We were profound enemies. I mean, we were vicious, interlocutors every day on the new liturgical movement because I favored the Salem method and he was more sympathetic to semiology. So therefore, of course, there must be an eternal war to the death, between us. We could never get along. And I finally, I just called him up, I said, look, Adam, we've done this whole rhythm, war between us. I said, but it turns out, I was just speaking to a group of a couple hundred Catholic musicians, they don't know anything about this subject at all. They're looking for some music to sing that's actually a liturgical text, the Word of God. Is there anything we can do to make this happen? And so we kind of decided to bury the hatchet over the Ictus, and decided to actually try to produce a book that might actually benefit somebody. And the result was, this was in October of, I think it was only 2 years ago now, right? And then by March, the book, Simple English Prophets, was out. Yeah. We just kind of cobbled together the model, and it was a furious, I called them every day. It's just awful the way I treat people, because I have no talent whatsoever. But I lean on people who do. I force them to work like 18 hours a day, to accomplish this goal, for very little money, So this is the situation that poor Adam was in. He was, forced to compose this book, with me as the taskmaster. But by March, the darn thing was in print. And I can tell you that this book, this one book, has changed the prospects for liturgical music in this country. So many convents are using it, so many monasteries are using it. It's being used in many seminaries and parishes all over the country. There are probably 2 or 3 parishes in every small, medium-sized, large-sized town that are using it today. It was the first book in 50 years that actually enabled Catholic musicians to be able to sing Mass propers without having to go all the way with Renewal and Romano. This book should have come out in 1965, right? It's true. But, it takes a while to figure these things out. It's just, it's been a half century, but we finally got there. Now, I like to think that Monsignor Schuler would approve it, and he was very much against English chant, which I understand, and I'm totally willing to defer to every one of his arguments, with the exception of just the pure practical point that we need this music right now. I hope that the Simple English Prophets will be replaced at some point by something better, ever more elaborate. I think we've got Father Weber's book coming out, right, later this year, Susan, right? Father Weber's book, Gregorian Chant in English for the Organ Fund.
Has recently announced his latest project.
Yeah.
Which he has, he's done what Organ Press, the Catholic Press has already done,
right.
Other companies, where he has a whole suite of things.
It's true.
So that you can just plug it right into your parish. And he's got another book now that he calls the successor to the English.
Yeah, he likes to call it successor. He's annoyed that we keep calling his old book. Right, Luminari, right. So we're living in a renaissance, really, of music. It's extraordinary. It took 50 years for this to happen. It's not just about Simple English Prophets. We've got the parish book of Psalms out there. These are Psalms by Arlene Ospina that are written in the Gregorian style, so now you can stand up and actually sing a song between the readings without feeling like an idiot. It's a great moment for us. Actually dignified music is coming back. And I think the important change for our time is that nowadays the aspirations are different than they were from the past. In the past, people wanted to destroy. They wanted to introduce secular music into parishes. They wanted to make everything less and less liturgical, less and less church-like. Now the aspirations of a whole generation have completely changed. They want to know, how can we find our way towards what we've lost? How can we recapture these beautiful traditions of the past? What do I need to do to make it possible for us to have something like sacred music again that can inspire the heart and the mind and cause us to integrate the purposes of the liturgical moment with our musical aesthetic? How can we do this? And these are the phone calls I'm getting every day. We see this aspiration revealing itself in the number of people who come to the colloquium every year. We have ever more attendees. Scholars starting in ever more college campuses. Things are changing. Things are changing dramatically. And I've even noticed it among older baby boomer musicians. Have been doing this stuff their whole lives. They realized that in many ways they were misled. It wasn't their doing, but they were just misled. They tried to do the right thing, but they were misled. Let me just leave you with a couple of things that I mentioned to somebody who would call me from Notre Dame the other day, writing to the student newspaper asking about this subject. I've worked very hard over the last few years and trying to take the intense, venomous rhetoric out of the realm of church music. And the reason is that I don't think it accomplishes anything. I have my preferences and I have my tastes, but I resent it when people on the Catholic left, call me the Torquemada of Gregorian chant. These kinds of things that's just uncalled for. Or treat me like, or act as if my whole agenda comes down to, a snobbery and a desire to impose a kind of conservatory training on the masses. None of which is true. But at the same time, I think they make a good point that they get tired of me calling them, aging hippies. They're longing for, the constant recreation of Woodstock, within their parishes. It's not true, so I should stop saying these things to them, I think we could just all lower the temperature of this debate and realizing that a lot of what's happened, a lot of what's gone wrong is intellectual confusion of the sort that Msgr Schuler identified. And also, I think, in a very practical way, we have lacked the resources to do the right thing for the last 50 years. We are now getting those resources now for the first time. These are new times. I think we just have to kind of let bygones be bygones and always look at every Catholic church musician as a potential convert to our cause, every parish as a potential St. Agnes, because that's the future. It's a brilliant thing. The other thing I would like to see put an end to is the hymn wars. It's not about what hymn you choose. It really is about what text you sing. That is a more important issue going forward. These are, I think, things we're discovering in our time. Well, let me conclude with a tribute to the great man, who knew so much at a time when people knew so little. And he was so confident about it because he was there at the Second Vatican Council and he knew what the dream was. And he saw the hand of God working in the world. He also saw the fallibility of mankind and all of our mistakes and all of our areas. But he knew that the Holy Spirit was at that council. And he knew that eventually that the Holy Spirit would sing again the music of the liturgy all around the world, just as it does every Sunday at St. Agnes. Thank you so much. We have a little bit of time for some questions and answers. Yes?
We need a K-12 curriculum for Catholic schools to use.
Yeah. What would that involve?
That's not faded and dusty.
Yeah. Well, actually, we've made some efforts in this regard. There's a book called Words with Wings, and what it does is it takes, the old Ward method, and instead of being, as you said, dusty, that was a program that depended very much on kind of daily music lessons. That's not possible really anymore. So Words with Wings takes the best of that old Ward tradition and tries to put it into something like a one-year musical program. So you can have a look at it. It's Church Music Association, right? How does this happen? We have no money, no staff. We've been publishing, most of the, coolest books, for the last 10 years in the world of church music. I don't understand it, but Where's the Place? It's pretty good. And that's the first, so it comes with a CD and a workbook and the instructor manual and everything. Yes?
That'll be on sale tomorrow.
Oh, and you're going to have it here? We have some samples here. Isn't it so great what's happening? Oh, I forgot to mention, there wouldn't be a Church Music Association America without Msgr Schuler. It wouldn't even exist. We wouldn't even be doing this work today. He is the father of everything we're doing, yes?
What was his involvement at Vatican II? I wasn't aware that he
Yeah, well, there was this whole generation, I would say, you know, it was probably 30 or 40, you know, top musicians at the time that were, you know, considered, you know, the musical establishment at the time. And they were very much instrumental in the writing of those, influencing the writing of those sections. Some people think that Sacrosanctum Concilium had two great influences. One was the musicians, and the other was the liturgists. The problem is that they didn't really kind of get together, you know? The liturgists were all in favor of the vernacular, the musicians all in favor of the Gregorian chant, and this is where the tension in the document comes from. But Msgr Schuler was very much engaged in that whole circle that was, you know, getting daily briefings and reports and had a huge influence on all the language that was used at the time in the council. So I guess you would call him, yeah, go ahead.
Jeffrey, Msgr Schuler was also, he was part of a, I don't know what it was called, a committee of some kind that was pulled together by the U.S. bishops after the council to advise them on what to do about the music.
Right.
And I don't know how well this is known. Virginia probably knows this better than I. But he, the committee, one of his themes was that he felt that one of the problems that led to the council was that there really was not adequate professional leadership in the church prior to the council. And so the bishops had an idea after the council. They were going to put $20 million and create a United States Sacred Music Institute of some kind. And the committee recommended against that. And they said what you would be better off doing would be to take that $20 million and go to the major music conservatories or training centers in the country, Juilliard, Eastman, whatever, and endow a chair in Catholic music so that you would have the best resources of the society in training musicians, and you would have a center that would guide musicians to work in the church to get not only that quality of training, but to get the kind of theological, liturgical training that they needed to work effectively in the Catholic Church. And that was, I mean, he was on that committee. They made that recommendation. Of course, it wasn't taken, and so the result is what it is. But he was, I thought it was a very forward-looking kind of thing when you look at what's going on today and what's happened in Catholic higher education in general.
Yeah.
That would have been a pretty significant...
Well, then you've also got the fact, I'm not sure, but Msgr Schuler was there at this whole period, but after the merging of St. Cecilia, Society of St. Cecilia and the St. Gregory Society into the Church Music Association of America, the consortiums, what is it? Internationalis Musica Sacra or whatever. Right. It was basically the Vatican's arm of concerning sacred music, appointed the Church Music Association of America to lead the American Church onto the path of sacred music following the Second Vatican Council after the merging. That was the purpose of the merger, was to kind of assume this leadership role, which it never did, of course. It was just a calamity. I mean, the whole organization was bankrupt by 1966, absolutely penniless. And then you had the National Association of Pastoral Musicians sort of, you know, jumping in to fill the place, right? And then Msgr Schuler kept the organization alive just by continuing to publish sacred music, you know, with no money at all. I mean, he lived, you know, sort of issue to issue. And it was basically a more or less a letterhead organization. That's a disparaging way to put it. It's like he kept the flame going, you know? It was a tiny flame, but he kept it lit all those years. And, you know, think about this in your own life, you know, the things you do. You think you're involved in a lost cause. We all feel that way sometimes. Msgr certainly must have felt that from time to time. But now you look at it in 2013, just what the CMAA has done over the last 5 or 10 years. We're helping to rebuild Catholic music and liturgy just from the ground up, and it's having a worldwide impact. I mean, the CMAA had a lot to do with the new English Missal and the fact that it uses these beautiful chants in English. English, that we see for the first time Gregorian chant in English put into the heart of the new missal. The CMAA had a big influence on that. And also the fact that it was given away for free online. I know for sure we had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
I continue, though, to feel like a challenge is the other publishers that, as long as they continue to publish their hymnals, their resources that we throw away. I think for many musicians, they think that's sanctioned,
right.
Especially because it might say Catholic in it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So, I guess, there's an education here that has to happen for the publishers so that they're not fearful that if they begin to put something like propers in their books and get rid of some of this other music, that they're not going to go bankrupt.
No, your sister, you're exactly right. I have friends who work both at GIA and OCP. They are really happy to put out books of prophecies if they thought that people would buy them. And they're really happy to stop publishing all the junk that they publish if people would stop buying them, actually. So a lot of it is marketing. I mean, there's a sort of cynicism at the heart of both of these institutions, I'm sorry to say. They're glad to put out anything, and they've got a business model, and they've got to worry about, they've got a lot of employees, and the employees have families, and they've got mouths to feed, and that's what it's all about. So I think, in the end, it's a matter of changing the ethos in the Catholic parishes. If we can get people to stop buying the bad stuff and start buying the good stuff, I can see OCP and GIA coming along entirely all along the way, and they're just that cynical. Actually, they're glad to publish anything as long as people buy it. So. Yeah, it's a serious, but it is a very serious problem. But the success of the CMAA has not been lost on these institutions. We have had enormous success in our publishing mission, and we've done it in outrageous ways. We give all the music that we publish away for free online, everything. We've never published a book that we don't encourage people to take for free and download. These are aggressive, tactics that we use. Just giving stuff away, getting people hooked on the music and hoping that they'll buy it, and then otherwise, having virtually no expenses whatsoever. It's a kind of a cool strategy, actually. It more or less works for organizations like ours. It wouldn't work for the OCP, but our success is not lost on these people. I know for sure the OCP has commissioned a complete set of English Mass propers from the monk at Meinrad. Clever Keller, yeah. So I know for sure that this is in play. But look, his times are changing, and everything is changing. The future, 10 years from now, everything's going to be very different. Mass propers, you're going to go to a mass where they don't have propers, you're going to have people start complaining. You're going to have priests showing up going, I don't know, haven't you guys heard about the importance of mass propers? What's wrong with you people? I mean, things are really going to be very different in 10 years. We are making such progress. These publishers will certainly come around. In 10 years, the world's going to look very different, I think. There will always be the reactionaries, there will always be the troglodytes, the thrown-back people who are just wedded to endless repetition of the St. Louis Jesuits. But the rest of the world is going to move on. Yes?
Do you have much feedback from the bishops?
Yes, actually we do. We seem to have really good relationships with increasing numbers of bishops who are interested in our work. And I've been intrigued by this because, I guess this recorder's on. You always have to worry what you're saying about bishops, with the recording. Because we've not really made any big efforts to court the bishops in any big way. We've just kind of, mainly because we don't have the resources at the time. We're just throwing music out there, But I think it's made a big difference. The new Archbishop of Portland, for example, is highly sympathetic, and I think actually was brought around to his own views on music through his experiences with Msgr Schuler. So we're seeing, once again, a new time where some of the most influential bishops in this country and around the world are entirely with us. And yet I don't want to exaggerate the importance of it. It's important that we have bishops come along and all that, but it really, in the end, it comes down to the average parish musicians. These are the people that we need to reach. And this has been, for me, the most frustrating thing over the work with the CMAA is getting to the average parish musician. These people, they're mostly volunteers, you know. They are just extreme conservatives, you know, whatever they've done in the past, they're going to do in the future. They don't want to ever change. You know, the experience of 1969, 1970 has basically, you know, caused people to be a little bit squeamish towards, you know, the new guy who comes in and says, hey, I got some great new ideas on music we should try. They're like, you know, we've been there, done that, let's just not, you know, so they're a little bit worried about this, which I understand. But that's, I think, the great challenge, is reaching average musicians. And if we can get the message across that they're being more true to their vocation by singing the text of the liturgy rather than something else, I think that can make the real difference. Because there's no musician in any Catholic parish anywhere in this country who isn't at some level sincerely committed to doing what is the right thing. I mean, they all want to do whatever is the right thing. Many of them don't know what that is. They need guidance, they need education and direction and inspiration, but they all sincerely want to do what the liturgy wants them to do. But we have to get the message out there, and that's what we're working on, you know, every day and every way. We've got blogs, we've got educational conscience. I don't know any other way. We just have to keep working and working at it. But I actually believe that the existing apparatus, what you would call the establishment, is at this point extremely vulnerable. Very vulnerable. This argument about the mass prophets always taking precedent over hymns, I've never once heard it refuted, or even attempted to be refuted. It's so powerful. Once you hear it one time. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you imagine that church architecture is going to be an influence on how the mass prophets, like, as you're making this argument, if everyone were to, like, if we were just having a scola saying the mass prophets from the front of the church, as so many newer churches,
yeah.
I can imagine that the emphasis of the congregation is going to be set up for continue to be on the singers instead of.
Yeah, it's annoying. I mean, in my own parish, we have to sing up front, so I deal with this every week. One of the major problems we have for getting good music in parishes, carpet. You know, this is huge. If you've got carpeted parish, it's just like there's virtually no hope. You know, I'm just sorry to say that, but you've just got to get rid of that carpet before anything else happens. Forget getting a new organ, forget hiring a new music guy, whatever, paying singers, blah, blah, blah. Just pull up the carpet. Get rid of the carpet. I mean, it's the cheapest thing you do. Even if it leaves a bunch of glue on the, it doesn't matter. Just get rid of the carpet. It's terrible. You can't ever have music with a dead space. And I feel so sorry because I know a lot of scholars have started in parishes where there are complete dead spaces and people are not persuaded by the music they hear. It's really very sad. Yes?
You were talking earlier about the importance of the text, and it reminded me of Pope Emeritus Benedict's last public pronouncement to the seminarians in Rome, perhaps now somewhat forgotten speech, about the dangers of the spirit of Vatican II. I'm wondering if there may not now be perhaps a similarly autonomous spirit of Pope Francis, which may or may not be accurately reflective of His Holiness's wishes.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's too early for observations on your part, but if you have any predictions of how this plays into what.
No, you know, I get calls. It's just the most incredible thing because I'm an economist, but the press doesn't call me on economics. They call me about the Pope. They're always calling me about so I'm always getting these calls all the time. And they want me to. They want me to speak on Pope Francis, but they don't. Nobody's actually interested in what I have to say. They want me to fit in with an archetype, a kind of modular, sort of template that they've drawn. And it's deeply entrenched. The whole press is this way. They're like, Pope Francis is a good guy because he's in favor of social justice and doesn't want a bunch of rules and you know, sort of saying he doesn't want to say mean things about, you know, sin or whatever. And you know, this contrast with Benedict, who is just this thrown back. You know the story, right? I mean, there's like no truth to any of this stuff. It's just this is just a complete fabrication. This is what they do to make the media work. This is the way they have to think about things. And so when I said, well, I'll give you a long interview. You won't use a word of it. I know you won't. Because I'm not going to say anything. It fits in with your pre-drawn agenda here. But I think your phrase, the spirit of Francis, is very interesting. because we certainly, I think, are starting to see that, and there's potential damage there. But by that, you know what he means, right? The spirit, meaning, yeah. I mean, it's not the authentic spirit. It's just it's sort of something manufactured by wishful thinking, left liberals more or less. Just not to find a point out of it, but yeah, that's exactly it. Well, thank you so much for listening. It's been wonderful to be here.